everybody, it's Dan. Welcome back and welcome to this review of the Victrix Pillage Norman Warband set. That is now part 4 in a 5-part series. I guess I'll dive right into my disclaimers here. So if you've not seen my other 3 videos, you don't necessarily have to, but I've made disclaimers in all of them along these lines. First of all, that this is, as I just mentioned, part 4 of a 5-part series. The first 4 videos are the reviews of these warbands that were just released in conjunction with the new Pillage rule set. And the 5th video is going to be a kit bashing video, in which I'm going to mix and match a lot of these sprues and bits from the different sets just to show off how versatile I feel that these sets are. I should also mention that this video is sponsored by Victrix, as all of these have been, and I'm so very grateful to them for sending it to us so we can take a look at it together. I'll tell you too, this is the one that I've been most excited to review. That's sort of partly why I was saving it for last, because in truth this is the one I've had, or I should say that this is the one with a combination of sprues that I have the least experience with. And if you're totally unfamiliar with Victrix's Pillage range, I just mentioned it was released in conjunction with the rules, but they've released 4 warband sets. We've gone over together the Saxons, the Rus, the Vikings, and now the Normans, that are almost like sampler packs of their main sets within their Dark Age line. So I think it's a very clever way to get people introduced to not only the small model count that the Pillage rules necessitate, but also it gives you a good idea of multiple Victrix sets all within one, I think, reasonably priced package. But as I just said, I don't know much about this set, because other than the Crossbowmen, I haven't really had experience with any of these sprues, so I'm excited to take a look at these with you. I should mention, first of all, the packaging that these all come in is not a box, but a bag. So it's very nice for display purposes. If you see it hanging in a store, it's easy to see all the sprues and the contents inside. I do see people are sometimes wary about shipping. I'll tell you, I've had dozens and dozens and dozens of things shipped from Victrix abroad. Right, I'm based in the United States, and I've never had anything snap on me, but I can tell you also from experience, if you have any issues at all, that you should just reach out to their support team. They're among the best I've ever dealt with. Artwork, I don't think we've ever talked about the artwork on these packages, but I think that especially for this warband range, it's really, I think, evocative and beautifully painted artwork. I will say that the Norman on the front here looks a little scared, but maybe that's just me, but I still think it's beautiful artwork, fantastic stuff. And what you'll also get inside are these 3 schematics, some of which are front and back, like this one here. And I don't remember, this is a semi-new thing for Victrix, like within the last few years. They've been doing these visual schematics that give you a recommended breakdown of the bits included. So I imagine that the mounted Normans did come with it, but the Norman infantry may not have, just based on timing, but I can't exactly remember. So some of the sets do have newly printed versions of these schematics, like the Vikings, when that set was released, did not have it. It had just like a printing on the back of the bits numbers and how things were recommended to go together. So these visual ones are just really handy to have. I'm actually starting to collect them in a binder because I'm that kind of a person. But as I mentioned, I think these are more guidelines than anything. As I said in that kit bashing video, I'll show off just how much of this can be blended together. So a whole lot of plastic within this one. You're going to end up getting 6 total sprues, and I'll show them off here really quickly. There are 2 sprues of their Norman Infantry, 8 models apiece. There's 1 sprue of their Norman Command. We're going to look at these all in detail. I'm just giving you an overview here. You're going to get 1 sprue of their Armored Norman Riders. We took a look at the unarmored one in the Saxon review. Sprue of Horses. And then sprue of Crossbows. Oh, I forgot my other disclaimer, which is that I'm going to treat each of these reviews as though they are totally independent of all of my other reviews. I mentioned, like, we've reviewed the Norman Crossbowmen, but I'm still going to go through that sprue like that separate review doesn't exist, so that all the info is contained here in one place. So now, with all the disclaimers out of the way, if you're new here, welcome. What we're going to do is we're going to go through each of these sprues in detail. I'm going to show off all the bits. I want to assemble some of the figures. I mentioned we're going to save the kit bashing that I normally like to do for that 5th video, which will be coming out a little later this week. We are going to do some scale comparisons, and I'll give you my final thoughts on the set. So without any more ado, let's jump on in here. I think in the Saxon set we started with the cavalry, so let's start there. So we're going to start with a horse sprue. Remember, one of these And I have been saying, because these sets are sort of unusual, that I normally like to talk about bits per sprue, which in some cases won't matter. Like this one is 1 sprue, so bits per sprue is everything in the set, but I sometimes hop back and forth between talking about per sprue and per set, so I'll try to make it clear when I do that, but most of the time when I list numbers of bits, I'm talking about per sprue. So this is actually the same horse frame that came in the Saxon set, which contains the unarmored riders, but both the unarmored and armored riders fit the same horses. And I'll just kind of pan here, but I mentioned there, these are probably some of the most beautifully sculpted horses that you can get in 28 millimeters. The Perry brothers, of course, are renowned for their sculpted horses, and I think they still hold up, even some of those being, 10-plus-year-old sculpts. Really lovely stuff, but the stuff that Victrix is putting out is really incredible. The amount of detail they're getting, the movement they're achieving with the horses, even that I didn't even realize this until afterwards, that they're 2-part horses. So many manufacturers have like 3-4-part horses where the heads and the tails are separate attachment points, which can become a little bit fiddly. I think many of us are used to doing that, but note too that none of the saddles are the same. There's little variations in detail. They do this like even with sword scabbards. You'll see that they try to add in a little bit of variation, so it creates such unique pieces when you start mixing these bits in too. So anyway, lovely stuff with the horses. I think they're really fantastic. And you'll note, spread around the sprue on the top and the bottom are a total of 16 shields. And remember, this is supplementing the rider frame, which has a whole host of its own bits. But 16 shields of a lot of different designs. So there's 4 that are these Andalusian, kind of Iberian or Spanish style designs. Because of course these are Normans, ostensibly, but you could use them for like First Crusaders, El Cid style campaigns. There are 3 of these flat kite shields. So there's the one here that you might not be able to see, but it has a slight curve to it. But there's this one, which is more of a Saxon style flat kite shield, or an early kite shield. So there's 3 of these, 1 here, 2 down here. There are then 5 of those curved kite shields, and even these have a variation within them. Like this one has no boss in the center, which to me indicates a slightly later design. Rounded top to this one, flat top to this one, 2 more roundeds down here. So you have enough shields to equip them all with the slightly more like quintessentially Norman, I think, rounded kite shield design, but you don't have to if you don't want to. There are then 4 different round shields, so you can kind of see from the glare, this one has a slight curve to it, kind of a rounded shield. This one is just a flat circular banded shield, same thing up here. So 2 each of those. So if I didn't mention the numbers, 4 Andalusian shields, 3 flat kite shields, 5 curved kite shields, 2 round or curved round shields, and 2 flat round shields. There you go. There are 4 swords, if I flip it around this way, which you can see are in hands. And the top and the bottom of the sprue mirror one another, so I guess I won't dance around much more because it's not necessary. But there's 4 swords. There are these, I learned from the last video, Andalusian swords. So again, Iberian. And I mentioned they look kind of like the Rohan swords from Lord of the Rings, which I'm sure were inspired by these Andalusian designs. But I think they are beautifully, like among the most detailed swords that I think Victrix has put out. Lovely stuff. You've got then 8 scabbards that are scattered. Remember, this is mirrored up on the top of the sprue as well. So you got scabbards here, slightly different designs. Some of them have swords drawn, and some do not. I think it's a 50-50 split between those. 6 daggers, 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom. You can see some curved designs, some straight, and then 8 total tassels. They can be glued onto shields or horses. I think they're supposed to go on shields, but there you have it. So great stuff, fantastic foundation for this rider set. So now let's take a look at the riders. One interesting thing that might jump out at you straight away is that while on the Saxon set, which had the unarmored riders, that had 4 riders to 4 horses, this sprue actually has 6 riders. And I've never picked up the armored Norman knight set, so I'm wondering, because there's 12 total horses, so there might be in the unarmored one you have 3 horse sprues and 3 rider sprues, whereas with the armored one, because there's 6 models, you might have 2 of these sprues, still with 3 sprues of horses. So if anybody knows, let me know. Or otherwise, if they include 3 of this in the armored sprue or armored set, That's pretty incredible because that's 18 riders to 12 horses. Take a look at these bodies, because this actually, to me, kind of mirrors what we saw with the medieval knight review that we did last summer, and where the poses that they achieve here are just so cool and so dynamic. You can see the level of detail is fantastic. Print quality is excellent. Or I shouldn't say print quality, but sculpt quality is excellent. And yeah, I mean, just look at the little details on the belts. You can see like slight folds in the chainmail, which must be very difficult to achieve. There are two bodies that are scale mail, like this one here. You can see it's a slightly different design than this one here. So you could have two guys mixed in with scale armor, or you could just have them all with chainmail. So as I said, I don't know if that was deliberately why they included two extra bodies on this frame to allow for that variety, or if this is just one half of the two rider frames in the full set. I'm not sure, but it's excellent, excellent detail. And I think between their horses and some of the dynamic poses you can achieve with their knights, I think it's hard to claim that anybody else is making cavalry better than Victrix is these days. So 6 bodies, and again, we'll put some of these together too, just so I can show you just how animated some of these poses are that you can pull off. There are 19 heads kind of scattered around the spruce. We'll start up here in the top, and you can see a really, really nice mix of armor types, some with face masks, some without, some just have like chainmail coifs wrapped up around their face. But it's an excellent, excellent mix. So 19 total heads. There are 7 that are fully enclosed with a mask or with chainmail, like we see some more examples down here. So 7 enclosed heads. There are 3 Arabized heads, which I'm borrowing a Victrix term there, but going back to like an El Cid campaign. You've got 3 heads that are Arabized, like this one here. Right, and then there are a total of 9 that are just armored helms, and I'll flip the sprue over here so you can see these better. So remember, 19 total heads, 7 enclosed, 3 Arabized, and the rest are just armored, just like these guys. But excellent detail. There's not a single duplicate on the sprue, which is impressive as hell. It's a great, great work. Now, there are 14 spears or lances, and I differentiate those like this is a spear, and then these are javelins. And of course, there's some kind of crossover where some are like light spears or throwing spears, but I'm just going to call them all spears or lances. So I'll move around the sprue here just because I'm going to call off weapons as we go. But keep that in mind. There's like I would call these javelins, whereas this I would call a lance or a spear. So there you go. So there's 14 spears or lances. I'm just going to kind of move slowly around the frame so I'm not dancing all over the place. There's 6 javelins, 4 maces or clubs. Like here's a club here. Here's a mace over here. There are 2 axes, like this one here. 4 swords, so each guy could have a sword if you wanted him to. 6 scabbards, which are kind of scattered throughout. And if I zoom in here, you can see some of the detail that they pull off with these scabbards. It's really, really impressive. I wish they would do like a whole separate conversion kit of just like weapons and scabbards, because they do such a great job with it. There you go. And then there's 10 kind of accessory bits scattered around, mostly like little daggers, pouches, stuff like that. There you go. Fantastic sprue. I'm looking forward to putting some of these together for you guys. Let's move into the Crossbowmen. I mentioned we have a review of these up on the channel. It's actually one of the earlier reviews that I did, maybe like within the first 10 reviews, something like that. And I remember it being an excellent kit. And it still looks to be an excellent sprue. Again, from a production quality, everything is so good. There's almost no flash. You can see the really crisp details. The only time you really ever see flash, and there's no examples here, but like it would be on really tiny bits like the tip of this crossbow bolt. You might see some flashing around that, but there's none on this sprue. So really, really fantastic. So there are 6 bodies on this frame, and you can see that 3 of them are chainmail. This one is a 2-parter, because this, I've assembled all of these. This is a like hunched over loading guy. there's a couple of different options, like this one kind of stringing the crossbow, pulling it back, and there's another variant where he has a bolt being placed down into it. So a couple of options for this guy who's fully like bent over at a 90-degree angle, loading a crossbow. But 6 total bodies, 3 chainmail, 1 padded, and then 2 unarmored, which is a good mix. There are 27 heads, and I did not misspeak, 27 heads to 6 bodies. Let's wrap around the sprue here so you can take a look at some of these. So of those 27 heads, I'm saying that 11 are unarmored, or just have like a cloth cap of some kind. So like this one's bareheaded, this guy here just has a hat, so that would all be unarmored. So 11 unarmored, 9 that are armored, like this dude here. And there are 7 that are, again, Arabized is the word that Victrix uses, so I'll borrow that. So these ones here. So plenty of heads there if you wanted to make them either for like a Moorish campaign, or if you wanted to just make them as Normans, you can make them armored, or you can make them unarmored if you'd like to. And you can see some of them are the flat style design, of flat top style designs. So like these two, you can actually even get more variety out of by mix and matching these heads here, right? So anyway, truly tremendous number of heads for 6 bodies. Now there are 6 bodies, but there are 15 crossbow arms. Now some of them, I would argue, really can only go with 1 model without some pretty heavy conversion work, like this one here, which goes with this guy. However, you can see a lot of them are just in various loading and aiming poses, and that's because so many of these bodies have these flat attachment points, which means with only minor conversion work would you be able to use these on any other, for example, Norman model or Dark Age figure from Victrix that has the same flat attachment point. Because that's really your only limiting factor when it comes to mixing and matching arms, is how much of the sleeve is already sculpted onto the body versus what's sculpted onto the arm. Anyway, I say all of that because it means that I think you could really make like up to 10 or 12 crossbowmen out of just this one kit by taking these arms and putting them onto some other Norman bodies, for example. So you have 15 different crossbows. They're fantastic. Great detail here. You can see some have chainmail arms because they could work with these more readily. Some don't. But it's an excellent mix, as I said, of firing, loading, and just kind of carrying or holding poses. So it's great stuff. There are a handful of scabbards actually down here. Remember, there are 4 technically armored bodies, 3 chainmail. So you wouldn't necessarily want everybody to have a scabbard, but 4 scabbards on the sprue. There are 6 quivers for bolts down here. And there's one more up here. And you can see these are all slightly different designs as well, different styles, which are great. And then you've got 5 kind of accessory pieces scattered around. Again, some pouches, small axes, daggers, etc. So really, really excellent set. I'm excited to see how these blend in with some other miniatures. And now we're moving into the infantry frames. So you've got 1 command, and you've got 2 of the base infantry. So let's start with the command, and then we'll look at 1 of those sprues of infantry. So remember, you're getting 1 of this command sprue, and on it you're going to get 6 bodies. And they're all armored, but 2 of them are wearing scale armor, 2 of them have padded armor, and 2 of them have chainmail. So let's take a look at those details here. So remember, it's 33% for each type. So you've got this really beautifully done scale armor. We saw kind of an example of that on the mounted guys as well, which is a nice way to differentiate like your Normans from, say, your Vikings. It's slightly different. I've talked before about like foot gear being another big part of it, helmet design, shield design. It's all tied in. And then of course your paint job, but having little details like that is really neat, and it's so beautifully done. So 2-part attachment here. It looks like it does go together in a particular way, but I think it's because this body is kind of leaning over like in a lunging pose. You can see it's just the detail on this is so good. Little knives and belts sculpted on here. No 2 models look the same. And then it looks like 3 of them have the flat top attachment points, which go with these helmets here, or could mix in with some from the mounted cavalry, from the Crossbowmen, or as we'll see, from the regular infantry as well. So lots of options there from a head standpoint. Yeah, they're really, really excellently done. So you've got 15 heads. I mentioned you got slightly different types, so pay attention. There are like these ones down here. Right, you've got 15 total heads, but 8 of them are specialty heads, the flat tops that go with these 3 models. Right, you've got 3 that are leaning and clearly designed to go with 1 model, which I think is probably this guy, if I were a betting man. Because this one has kind of leaning over. So any of these 3 heads I think can go with this guy. Looks like he's kind of reaching across himself with a weapon. And then from there you've got 3 armored and 1 unarmored. So a good amount of variety even just on this command sprue. 7 spears, and some of those are really like banner poles or standards, like this one here, but I guess it could just be like a long pike or a lance if you wanted it to be. But 7 spears scattered around in slightly different lengths, which is cool. There are 6 swords, again just kind of scattered around. There are 3 axes, these 2 over here. There's 1 mace, which again I think is supposed to go with this guy, if you wanted to. And then there are enough scabbards for everybody, kind of scattered around the sprue down here. And then a handful of accessories, I think 5 total, like these up here. There you go. And then of course you've got 6 shields. 3 are the flat kites, and 3 are the curved kites. And I didn't talk about this before, but all the backs of their shields are sculpted, which I'm a big fan of. So there you have it. Really, really great command frame there. It gives you tons of options. And then let's isolate one of these infantry frames. So remember, you're going to get 2 of these inside of the set as well. So let's take a look at the front and back here. And then we'll take a look at these bits in detail. So 8 miniatures on these frames. And I mentioned too, it gets a little confusing if you're not familiar with the sprues, that on the back they list like 8 unarmored Norman infantry, 8 armored Norman infantry, and that almost implies that there's 2 sprues, but there's not. It's 1 sprue with the 50-50 breakup of the armored and the unarmored. So in this case, I would actually argue that there are 6 armored, because you can see they have padded armor. It's more lightly armored, I guess is what you would call it. But there's 4 guys here that are really heavily armored, like maybe outside of their Foot Knight miniatures, maybe some of the most heavily armored Dark Age figures that, or early medieval figures that they make. Super imposing looking and cool. You could definitely make like a Hearthguard, or again, I guess what they're supposed to represent are dismounted Norman knights. Right, great detail. The chainmail looks fantastic. Even this guy's leaning, you can see some like kind of creases in the chainmail where you would want it to be. So it's excellent stuff. And then as I mentioned, you've got 2 that are in padded armor. One has kind of like the cross hatch design, and the other is different, but they're nice animated poses. And then you've got these 2 here that are unarmored. But again, excellent detail on the folds. You can see even like the foot gear is slightly different, just to add some variety. And you can imagine, again, I talk about this all the time, but that if you were then layering on different weapons or bits, that you're making just totally unique models with this much variety in a set. So yeah, they're really beautiful. I almost feel bad because I said like I don't have much experience with this set. I had picked up like secondhand some of the command models years ago, but I feel like I overlooked this set because it's so well done. You can see, I mentioned the production quality is super high on all of these. Like this is the only time out of all these sprues that I've seen any flash of any kind, but that's easily cleaned up, like even just with a finger. You can see you can clean that up. So certainly with a file or the side of an X-Acto knife, you're going to have no issues at all. So there are also a ton of heads on this sprue. So let's take a look here. So it's on the top and the bottom of the sprue. You're going to have 22 heads in total. Now 7 of these are, again, this flat top design. And you can see it looks like all of them have like their nasal helms. They have the nasal guard, but they have different top designs, different banding. Oop, too close. Different banding or riveting on them. But these 7 heads would go with these 2 bodies here. Right. There are, from there, you also have to pay attention to, you can see like these 2 guys have like a sheared off, slightly different sheared off, but sheared off design. And that goes with these heads here. So anyway, of those, beside that, paying attention to those attachment points, you've got 6 enclosed helms, and I'll just kind of wrap around the sprue now. 6 enclosed helms, like these here. Again, to make some super heavily armored foot knights if you wanted to. 6 enclosed helms. You've got 2 that are unarmored, and then 7 that are just regular armored, if you will. Like this guy here. So a good mix of different head options there, which in conjunction with some of these bodies, as I say, can make either some light infantry, some medium infantry, or some very heavy infantry, which is a great mix. For weapons, again, might help if I just move around the sprue here, but you can see there are 9 spears, and some of them are in like thrusting overhead, some are underhanded, some again could be like throwing spears, like light spears, if you want them to be. There are 8 swords, so enough swords to equip everybody with one if you wanted to. I'll move up here. From there are 4 axes, and the axes here are actually all different axe head designs, like this one here, this one here. So I love seeing that. Just variety even within weapons. There are 2 maces, like this is a good example. Oh, here's the other one. And then there's 3 knives, little accessory bits. And then it looks like there's enough scabbards for everybody. Yeah, 8 scabbards. Some up here. And again, some of them are, you can even see the size difference. Like some of them are, these are the regular Dark Age scabbards that come on the Saxon and the Viking sets. And I think there's 3 variant scabbards from those sets, having just dealt with a lot of those sets. These are unique to these Norman sprues, though. These are the slightly bulkier design. So it's even nice to have a variety of within one set. So there you have it. So a total of 32 figures within this Warband set. Let's assemble some examples from each of these sprues, and we'll see how they all scale up. Alright, here we go. So I've got some miniatures built up from all of these sprues, starting with the infantry frame. So again, this looks like a command model from how heavily armored it is, but this is just off the infantry frame. I'm half tempted to actually convert these up with my medieval foot knights that we just reviewed last month, because they're heavily armored enough, especially if I do some head swaps. And here we have just a spearman from the same set. One thing to note, I didn't think about this since I was putting them together, but the only thing you're lacking in this set that you have in, I think, all the other sets is access to 2-handed weapons like Dane axes. So you'd need to source those from a different kit. Again, I don't know if there's impact in the Pillage rule set. Here's one that I made up that definitely is not recommended in the instructions. I just pulled 2 axes from the command frame on this guy for Tommy 2 axe. Here's another command model. Just such fantastic, again, dynamic poses on these figures. Makes me feel silly for having not picked any of these sets up in the past, other than these Crossbowmen, which look as excellent as I remember them being. I said too that I think the schematics really are guidelines. Again, I keep alluding to it, and we'll do it, but a big kit bash video where I show off just how versatile I think these sets are. But the only time I ever find myself using this schematic is if I kind of get stuck. If I find I've tried dry fitting a couple of arms and nothing seems to work, then I'll look at the schematic and see what's supposed to go there. And here's one of the knights. They do such a good job with cavalry models. And of course I had to finally use one of those Andalusian swords. So super easy to put together, and I think the end result's fantastic. Alright, here we go. So I've got 6 assembled models spinning around here on the Lazy Susan with the primed white figures, which have the name of either a range or a manufacturer listed in red down on the base. But the bases are the same height. You can see some miniatures have splash bases or puddle bases, some do not. I mentioned in all of these videos that my general assessment is that Victrix is kind of perfectly in between my fantasy ranges and my historical ranges. However, I still think that's true, kind of generally. But I feel like the Normans are slightly larger. That was sort of my impression with the Crossbowmen. You can even see there in the middle, you've got a Norman on the right and then a Victrix Rus figure on the left. And the Victrix Rus is fully upright, like standing, and the Norman is basically the same height, but you can see kind of crouched down just a little bit. So it's not a huge noticeable height. I've mentioned before too that I like slight height variety within my figures, especially my human figures. But even here too, you can see that Norman is, I think, much bigger than, say, the Perry Foot Knight on the right, and the Norman is like quite crouched over. But as I said, good to have a bit of variety in height with different figures. So what's the final verdict? I think this is my favorite Pillage Warband set. I had set out, looking at the sprue contents before they were released, thinking that the Saxons would be my favorite. I think it's a great set, but this one, having now put some of these miniatures together, has sold me. Again, the only thing you're missing is Dane axes, like some two-handed weapons, which you can definitely source from other sets. Do some kitbashing if you wanted to have some Dane axe wielding Normans. You could also, I think, pick up like the Huskarls set, which has everybody with the Dane axe, and these would blend in, I think, beautifully with this set in particular if you wanted some of that. But it's just so well rounded, I think, otherwise, in terms of the types of infantry that you can make from it. Again, I feel really foolish for having not dabbled with this set before. I really feel like I know my Victrix sets well, and I was not familiar with this enough to know just how high quality some of these figures are. And I feel like beyond Pillage, this is a great foundational set for games like Saga, for like a Norman faction. I think you could pick this up. You've got plenty of infantry, kind of a starter cavalry force. If you picked up, for example, a box of the unarmored cavalry to supplement this, you've got a fantastic force for Saga right there. Or even like Middle Earth strategy battle games. I was thinking about either the Saxons or these for like a Rohan force. I think we'll be kind of exploring that with some future shopping guide videos, but they look really good for that kind of more grounded fantasy aesthetic, if that's something that you're looking to do. And again, for a starter Middle Earth strategy battle games force, this is pretty great for Rohan, again, maybe with a couple more cavalry models. So there you have it. So anyway, this is, again, beautifully detailed. I think this is probably the strongest sets in terms of composition. And it's great to see another fantastic entry from Victrix. Makes me very excited to see kind of how they expand this theme. I hope they start doing this with some of their Ancients line. Introduce some, even if it's not just for Pillage, but to have kind of these sampler pack style sets to introduce people to some miniatures that they might not otherwise be willing to pick up if they were only in sets of 60 models. So very excited to see what the future holds for this. Once again, huge thanks to Victrix for sponsoring the video, sending this to us to take a look at together. I mentioned there's going to be a fifth video that's going to be coming out just a little bit later this week, in which we're going to be bashing all these sprues together to see what kind of miniatures we can come up with. I've been thinking long and hard about how I want to do it, and I think what I'm actually going to do is prime the sprues in different colors, and I'll have like a color key down at the bottom, so you can see what bits are coming from what set without me having to constantly rattle that out for you. But we'll have more details in the video itself when it comes. Beyond that, I mentioned there's some painting content coming up. We have the Victrix Foot Sergeants set should be arriving here soon. They got delayed by tariffs, but should be arriving here within a couple of days. So looking forward to that as well. Grateful to all of you for dropping by for this one in the meantime. I'll see you in the next one, and until then, happy gaming.